I'm Emma Collins, 34, a wedding photographer and event planner, and recently I received a message that completely upended my world. You're not invited to the wedding. Kimberly doesn't want you there. Kimberly, my own sister, the same. Sister whose dream wedding I had invested over $35,000 to help create. My hands shook as I stared at my phone, surrounded by the 55 detailed planning files I had spent months perfecting. How could this happen? If you've ever experienced the pain of family betrayal, I know exactly how you feel. Let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever given everything only to be cast aside. Growing up in our suburban Seattle home, the dynamic between Kimberly and me was clear from an early age. She is 5 years younger and was always the favored child in our parents' eyes. Patricia and Robert Collins never hid their preference, though they would firmly deny it if confronted. I can trace this pattern back to our earliest memories. When I was 7 and Kimberly only 2, my parents threw her an extravagant birthday party, a bouncy castle, a professional entertainer, and a custom cake. 2 months later, my 8th birthday was marked by pizza and a rented movie. When I asked why my celebration was so modest, my mother said, "Kimberly is still little. She needs more special attention." This excuse echoed throughout my childhood. By middle school, I had accepted my role as the responsible one. Kimberly earned praise for average report cards, while I was expected to maintain straight A's without acknowledgement. When she accidentally broke a neighbor's window with a softball, I was reprimanded for not supervising her better. The message was unmistakable. Kimberly's achievements were celebrated, and her mistakes blamed on others. This pattern continued through high school. I joined every club, maintained perfect grades, and worked part-time jobs, desperate for the validation freely given to my sister. Meanwhile, Kimberly navigated school with average performance and constant praise. The defining moment came during my senior year. I had saved for a summer photography course at a prestigious arts program. 2 weeks before it started, Kimberly broke her arm playing soccer. The medical bills were only partially covered by insurance, and my parents turned to me. "We hate to ask Emma, but your sister needs this more than you need that photography course." Without hesitation, I gave up my savings, watching my dreams slip away as Kimberly received top medical care. Despite this setback, I pursued photography passionately. Working 3 jobs, I put myself through community college while building a portfolio, dedicating every spare moment to mastering my craft. My parents fully funded Kimberly's private university education, where she changed majors 4 times before settling on communications. Each change was met with their unwavering support. Meanwhile, I struggled to transfer to a state university, balancing work and school while launching my photography business. The early years were challenging. I worked weekends, shooting weddings, and spent weekdays developing client relationships. Slowly, my reputation grew. Couples began specifically requesting me, often booking a year in advance. I expanded into event planning after noticing many clients struggling to coordinate vendors. 10 years of relentless effort transformed my one-woman operation into Collins Event Photography in Planenga, respected company in the Seattle wedding industry. I achieved financial stability through sheer determination, despite never receiving the support my sister enjoyed. During this time, Kimberly's life followed a familiar pattern. After college, she moved between jobs, rarely staying longer than a year. During periods of unemployment, our parents covered her rent and expenses. Occasionally, she would ask me for loans to cover extras like vacations, designer bags, or car repairs. These loans were never repaid, and any mention of repayment led to accusations of me being overly concerned with money. Despite all this, I held on to hope that our relationship might eventually become more balanced. Every family gathering, I arrived optimistic that this time my achievements would be recognized, that my parents would see my value, and Kimberly would show genuine gratitude. But holidays played out the same way. Kimberly dominated conversations with dramatic stories about her latest adventures or problems. Our parents hung on her every word, offering advice, sympathy, or praise as needed. When I mentioned a major client's success or business milestone, the response was usually, "That's nice, dear," before the focus quickly shifted back to Kimberly. I built my business partly for validation, a tangible proof of my worth that no one could dismiss. Yet, no matter how successful I became, the family dynamics remained unchanged. I was the dependable one expected to give endlessly without asking for anything in return. Kimberly was the cherished child whose every desire took precedence. This was our family ecosystem. When Kimberly met Brandon at a friend's wedding I was photographing, I had no idea this would trigger the most painful chapter of our relationship. Kimberly announced her engagement during a Sunday family dinner. 6 months after dating Brandon, I had arrived early to help my mother prepare the meal, another unspoken expectation. Kimberly burst through the door, literally jumping with excitement. "I'm engaged," she exclaimed, holding out her left hand to show off a diamond ring that must have cost Brandon 3 months' salary. My parents erupted in celebration. My mother immediately began to cry, and my father brought out a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. I pushed aside the sting. No such bottle had appeared when I signed the lease on my studio, and embraced my sister with genuine happiness. I'm so excited for you, Kim, I said, admiring the ring. It's absolutely beautiful. Over dinner, Kimberly shared the details of Brandon's elaborate proposal. Kimberly described her proposal a private sunset yacht cruise, complete with a string quartet, champagne, and a photographer to capture the moment Brandon dropped to one knee. As she shared every detail, I felt a familiar mix of emotions. Happiness for her joy, combined with the ache of knowing my parents would never celebrate my achievements the same way. Then my mother suggested I photograph the wedding, framing it like a generous opportunity rather than a professional service. Oh my God, would you? Kimberly asked, eyes wide. That would be amazing. You know all the best vendors and venues. You could totally help me plan everything. Before I could respond, balancing professionalism with sisterly support, we were interrupted by the arrival of Brandon and his parents, Margaret and William, who joined us for dessert. That the social atmosphere shifted instantly. Brandon's family exuded old money confidence. Margaret wore subtle but costly jewelry, and William casually mentioned their vacation home in Nantucket. As the conversation unfolded, subtle class tensions emerged. When William inquired about my photography business, his polite tone carried a faint dismissiveness. Margaret asked if I had a proper studio or worked from home, barely hiding her surprise when she learned about my commercial space. They spoke about Brandon's executive role at his father's investment firm, with the assumption that everyone understood its prestige. I noticed Kimberly adapting her mannerisms, her speech becoming more formal, and her job at a marketing firm suddenly sounded more impressive than ever before. By dessert, she was clearly performing a polished version of herself to impress her future in-laws. 2 weeks later, Kimberly called to ask if we could meet for coffee to discuss wedding plans. At the local cafe, I found her surrounded by magazines, her expression unusually serious. I was hoping you could give me some professional advice, vendor recommendations, timeline suggestions, that kind of thing, she began. I replied genuinely, happy to help however I could. As we talked, her request grew. Actually, I was kind of hoping you might handle the photography and planning yourself, maybe as a sister discount? She smiled hopefully. It would mean so much to have you involved. I hesitated. My professional experience warned me about mixing business with family, but this was my sister's once-in-a-lifetime day. I'd be happy to photograph the wedding at my family rate, I offered carefully. For planning, I could provide consultations and recommendations, but not full coordination. Her face fell instantly. I was really counting on you to handle everything. No one knows what I want better than you. Brandon's parents expect something really special, and I'm overwhelmed. Her eyes filled with tears, a tactic I'd seen her use effectively with our parents. Against my better judgment, I agreed to provide both photography and planning at half my usual rate, a discount worth thousands. Kimberly brightened immediately, hugging me across the table and promising this would be the best sister project ever. A month later, Kimberly called, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. When she calmed enough to speak, she explained, their wedding budget had a major shortfall. Brandon's parents would only contribute if the wedding took place at their preferred venue, exclusive venue, far more expensive than Kimberly and Brandon had planned. We just can't afford it, she cried. But if we don't do it there, his parents will be so disappointed. Mom and Dad can only help so much. I might have to give up on my dream wedding. Though my rationale side warned me, years of sacrificing for Kimberly took over. Let me see what I can do, I said. I have some connections at Lakeside Manor. Maybe I can work something out. That was the first of many conversations where I committed to covering additional wedding expenses. The $15,000 venue deposit secured at a slight discount but still non-refundable. A premium photography team at $1,800 since I'd be busy coordinating. Gourmet catering for $1,700. Designer floral arrangements costing $1,500. Each time I told myself this investment would finally heal our relationship, that it would make my parents recognize my worth, and that Kimberly would understand my love for her. To manage the growing project, I created a detailed digital planning system, 55 meticulously organized files, including vendor contracts, timelines, guest lists, and custom design boards. I developed a wedding website featuring the venue and accommodation info for out-of-town guests. I built spreadsheets to track every expense, deadline, and detail. My motivation went beyond family matters. Professional pride drove me to craft an exceptional event. This wedding would highlight my skills and attract high-end clients, impressed by the sophistication of Kimberly's celebration. More importantly, I wanted my sister to have her perfect day despite our complicated history. As I invested tens of thousands of dollars and countless hours into Kimberly's wedding, I believed I was building a transformed family relationship, one where my contributions would finally be valued and my worth recognized. I couldn't have imagined how painfully wrong that belief would prove. The first 3 months of planning went like a dream. Kimberly and I toured venues on weekends before choosing Lakeside Manor, a stunning waterfront estate with panoramic views of the Olympic Mountains. Using my industry connections, I secured preferred dates and negotiated access to normally restricted areas for photography. You're amazing, Kimberly gushed as we walked the grounds, imagining where each element would go. I can't believe you got ... This place is absolutely perfect, Kimberly exclaimed as we toured the venue, her enthusiasm sparking a rare moment of sisterly connection that made me feel my investment in her wedding was worthwhile. When she found her wedding dress, a hand-beaded gown that brought tears to both of us, the shared emotions seemed to rise above our complicated past. No one else could have helped me find this, she said, hugging me tightly in the boutique. You just get me, M. I dedicated my professional skills to creating a custom wedding website with a secure planning portal where Kimberly could track progress in real time. I developed detailed design boards to visualize every part of the celebration, from the ceremony layout to the reception table settings. I crafted comprehensive timelines to ensure everything from the rehearsal, dinner through the post-wedding brunch would be perfectly timed. Evenings and weekends became devoted to Kimberly's wedding. I rescheduled paying client appointments to accommodate vendor meetings for her, staying up late to finalize contracts and confirm details. My emotional investment grew alongside the financial commitment, both fueled by the hope that this project would heal our family wounds. One evening, after a 4-hour menu tasting, Kimberly took my hands across the table. I don't know what I'd do without you, she said, her eyes sincere. This wedding would be a disaster if not for you. You're the best sister anyone could ask for. That rare moment of appreciation gave me hope that our relationship was finally changing. I doubled down, determined to create an event so extraordinary it would transform our family forever. The first challenge came during a meeting with Brandon's parents at the venue to discuss their financial contribution. What started as a polite walkthrough quickly became tense. So you do this professionally? Margaret asked, reviewing my portfolio with a faint frown. How charming that you turned a hobby into a little business. Kimberly unexpectedly defended me. Megan is actually one of Seattle's most sought-after wedding planners. She books out a year in advance for most events. Margaret responded with a condescending pat on my arm. Well, isn't that quaint? William chimed in. We used Hartwell & Associates for our anniversary last year. They handle events for the governor, you know? Throughout the meeting, Brandon's parents challenged my vendor recommendations, suggesting pricier alternatives. Favored by their country club friends, darling, you simply must use Blackwood Catering, Margaret insisted. Their chef trained in Paris. This other company seems adequate, but not quite what we envisioned for Brandon's wedding. As the meeting progressed, I noticed Kimberly's responses subtly shift. Initially, she defended my choices, but gradually she began to defer to her future in-laws' preferences. By the end of the walkthrough, she nodded eagerly, along with Margaret's suggestions. Avoiding my gaze when I mentioned budget increases, we'll just have to make it work, Kimberly whispered when I pulled her aside to discuss the $3,000 catering upgrade. They're really set on it, and I want them to be happy. That night, I updated my financial spreadsheets to reflect the catering change and other upgrades Brandon's parents requested. I transferred more money from my business account to cover the mounting costs, telling myself this investment was worth it for Kimberly's happiness and our relationship as planning advanced. I expanded my digital documentation to 55 files, covering every wedding detail, vendor contracts, and communication logs, detailed timelines for the planning process and wedding day, guest lists with RSVP tracking, seating charts, budget spreadsheets with payment schedules, design concepts with mock-ups, photography shot lists, lighting plans, menu details including dietary accommodations, transportation schedules for guests and the wedding party, and contingency plans for weather and other issues. Each file reflected hours of work and professional expertise I'd typically charge thousands for. For Kimberly, I provided these services with the same dedication I gave my highest-paying clients, maybe even more. Considering my emotional investment, in her perfect day, balancing my business responsibilities with Kimberly's wedding became increasingly difficult. I worked 7 days a week, managing paying clients during business hours, and focusing on Kimberly's wedding nights and weekends. Despite the strain, I stayed committed, believing this project would finally earn me the family recognition I'd long sought. What I didn't realize was that the foundation of this hope was already crumbling as Kimberly aligned herself more and more with Brandon's family's expectations and attitudes, setting the stage for the painful betrayal ahead. 6 months before the wedding, our dynamic shifted noticeably. What had been collaborative planning sessions turned into critiques where nothing I proposed met Kimberly's standards. During a meeting to finalize reception details, she rejected the table layout I'd spent days perfecting, a design maximizing aesthetics and guest comfort while accommodating the venue's structural constraints. This just looks so basic, she said, wrinkling her nose. Brandon's mom showed me a layout from his cousin's wedding at the Four Seasons. Can't we do something more like that? I explained patiently. The Four Seasons ballroom has a completely different layout. It doesn't have support columns like Lakeside Manor. Her tone sharpened. Well, can't you figure something out? You're supposed to be the professional here, she added, mimicking Margaret. Margaret says a good planner can make any space work. I noticed Kimberly had started not only adopting Margaret's opinions, but her mannerisms and speech patterns. She referenced Margaret and William frequently. While our own parents had become simply mom and dad, she began Kimberly had started criticizing vendors and services she once loved, using phrases that suspiciously mirrored comments from Brandon's mother. After hours of revising to meet Kimberly's suddenly changing preferences, she finally approved. A new table layout, but it required renting extra decor and specialty furniture, adding $2,000 to an already stretched budget. When I mentioned the extra cost, she sighed heavily. If it's too expensive, just say so, she snapped. I'm trying to have one special day, but I guess that's too much to ask. That's not what I said, I replied, stung by her I just want to make sure you understand the financial impact before we commit. You're always so focused on money. She dismissed me. This is my wedding, Megan. It's supposed to be about love, not spreadsheets. I absorbed the extra expenses without protest, transferring more money from my business account. That night, as I reviewed my financial commitments, serious doubts crept in for the first time. Still, I pushed them away, telling myself this tension was just normal bridal stress that would pass. 5 months before the wedding, an even more painful blow came. From the moment Kimberly announced her engagement, she had promised I would be her maid of honor. Who else would I possibly choose? She said. You're my sister and my best friend. Despite knowing our relationship hadn't reflected that closeness, I was touched. I embraced the role, ready to support her through every pre-wedding tradition. Then came the brunch where Kimberly revealed her final bridal party to her friends. I arrived to find her seated with 6 other women, champagne flowing freely. My amazing sister and wedding planner, Kimberly called as I approached. The phrasing sister and wedding planner, not maid of honor, sent a cold warning through me. As I sat, Kimberly raised her glass. I want to thank everyone for being here today, she began. I've been thinking hard about my bridal party. Julia, my roommate from college, and ride or die for the past 10 years. I'd be honored if you'd be my maid of honor. The table erupted in cheers while I sat frozen, glass halfway to my lips. Julia gave me an apologetic smile. Kimberly continued, and of course my bridesmaids, Taylor, Zoe, Ashley, Paige, and my sister Megan. Later, when I pulled Kimberly aside to ask about the change, she acted surprised by my confusion. I thought you'd be relieved, she said. You're already doing so much with planning and photography. This way, you won't have the added stress of maid of honor duties. But you specifically asked me to be your maid of honor, I reminded her. We talked about it, right? After you got engaged? Did I don't really remember that? She shrugged. Anyway, it makes more sense this way. Julia can handle all the bridal party stuff while you focus on making the wedding perfect. She patted my arm condescendingly, an echo of Margaret's gestures. It's really for the best. Before I could respond, Kimberly rejoined the group, leaving me with the unmistakable feeling I'd been demoted. That feeling deepened when she announced the bridesmaid dresses would be custom-made by a designer Margaret had recommended. $800 each. Isn't that a bit expensive? I asked cautiously, thinking of the financial burden on her friends. Margaret says quality shows. Kimberly replied dismissively. If it's too much for you, just say so. I'm sure we can find something off the rack that won't clash too badly with the designer dresses. The implication was clear. Pay up or stand out awkwardly. I silently added another $800 to my growing wedding expenses, wondering when my sister had become someone I barely recognized. At a bridesmaid gathering the next week, I overheard Kimberly. In the kitchen with Julia and Taylor, it's actually working out perfectly having Megan as just the wedding planner, she said. She's so detail-oriented and bossy anyway. Can you imagine her trying to be maid of honor too? Total control? Freak disaster. The casual cruelty stung more than the demotion itself. When I tried to talk to Kimberly about how hurt I was, she instantly became defensive. Oh my God, were you eavesdropping? That's so invasive. I was just joking with the girls. You're being way too sensitive. By the end of the conversation, somehow I was apologizing for overreacting and adding stress to her wedding planning process. This pattern, Kimberly being thoughtless, then making me feel guilty for responding naturally, had defined our relationship for years, but never so painfully blatant. For months before the wedding, tensions escalated. During a family dinner, with Kimberly, Brandon, my parents, and me. My parents lavished praise on every detail. Kimberly described from the hand-calligraphed invitations to the custom cocktail named after her and Brandon. You have such exquisite taste. Sweetheart, my mother gushed. Everything sounds absolutely perfect. Not once did anyone acknowledge that most of these perfect elements were my ideas or paid for by me. When the topic turned to the venue change caused by renovations at the original site, my father praised Kimberly's quick thinking in securing a better location. Actually, I interjected gently. That was a pretty stressful situation. I had to call in several professional favors and pay a rush booking fee to secure the new venue. An uncomfortable silence fell. My mother recovered first. Well, it all worked out, didn't it? Let's not focus on problems now. I'm not focusing on problems, I clarified. I just wanted to mention that securing that venue on short notice wasn't simple and required a significant investment. There you go again, making everything about money. Kimberly sighed dramatically. We get it, Megan, she said. You're contributing financially. Do you want a medal? That's not what I began, but my father cut me off. Your sister's under a lot of stress with this wedding, Megan. Let's not add to it by bringing up finances at the dinner table. Taste. Brandon's father had made a nearly identical comment about poor taste when I had mentioned budget considerations during a previous meeting. The parallel was striking. Kimberly wasn't just adopting Margaret's attitudes. My own parents were now mirroring the Thompsons' dismissive approach as well. From across the table, Brandon gave me a look that seemed almost sympathetic, but he remained silent as Kimberly launched into another story about Margaret's connections. Securing them a meeting with a celebrity baker, I excused myself early, claiming a client emergency. Sitting in my car outside my parents' house, I finally let the tears flow freely. Decades of family dynamics crystallized in that dinner conversation, my contributions minimized, my concerns dismissed, my sister's desires elevated above all else. Still, I couldn't bring myself to withdraw from my commitments. Too much money had already been spent, too many professional relationships leveraged. More importantly, a lifetime of putting Kimberly's needs before my own had conditioned me to ignore my instincts when they conflicted with her happiness. I drove home that night rationalizing Kimberly's behavior as pre-wedding anxiety, my parents' dismissiveness as wedding excitement, my own hurt feelings as oversensitivity. I told myself everything would improve after the wedding, that this tension was temporary, and my sacrifices would eventually be recognized and appreciated. How wrong I was. 3 months before the wedding, disaster struck. I received a frantic call from Kimberly at 7:30 in the morning. The venue just called, she wailed, her voice shrill with panic. They're canceling our contract. Something about new management and policy changes. What are we going to do? The wedding is ruined. I immediately shifted into problem-solving mode, setting aside my own work schedule for the day. Let me handle this, I assured her. I have contacts at several comparable venues. We'll figure something out. For the next 48 hours, I worked nonstop, calling in every professional favor I'd accumulated over a decade in the wedding industry. I reached out to venues typically booked 2 years in advance, leveraging personal relationships with managers and owners. I negotiated with vendors to adjust their schedules for the new date we might need to select. Finally, I secured an even more exclusive location, Crescent Harbor Estate, a private property rarely available for events. The owner, a former client, whose daughter I'd photographed, agreed to host Kimberly's celebration as a personal favor to me. There was, however, a significant catch. The rental fee was $5,000 more than our original venue. Additionally, the date shift required rush fees from several vendors. In total, the venue crisis added nearly $8,000 to an already substantial budget. When I called Kimberly with the news that I'd saved her wedding, her response was lukewarm, at best. Crescent Harbor. Isn't that kind of rustic? She asked doubtfully. Rustic. It's a $7 million estate with manicured gardens and a ballroom, I replied, bewildered by her reaction. It's actually an upgrade from Lakeside Manor. Most couples can't even get on their waiting list. I guess it could work. Let me check with Brandon's parents. They might have concerns about the location being too remote. I bit back my frustration. The property was exactly 3 miles further from the city than our original venue, hardly remote. More importantly, I'd just pulled off a minor miracle, securing a suitable venue on short notice, depleting my goodwill and personal savings. Later that day, Kimberly called back. Margaret and William drove by Crescent Harbor. They think it'll be acceptable, though Margaret mentioned the gardens aren't as well maintained as the ones at her country club. But beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. The dismissive tone cut deep, but I focused on the practical. I updated all 55 planning files, notified vendors, and adjusted timelines. I transferred more funds from my rapidly diminishing savings, telling myself this crisis management was an investment in Kimberly's happiness and our future relationship. 2 months before the wedding, I planned and hosted Kimberly's bridal shower at an upscale restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. I personally covered the $4,000 bill, which included a private dining room, custom menu, professional photographer, and personalized gifts for each guest. I arrived early to oversee setup, ensuring every detail reflected Kimberly's taste, from the exact shade of pink in the floral arrangements to hand-lettered place cards. The event was picture-perfect, exactly as I'd envisioned. When Kimberly arrived with our mother and Margaret, I greeted them warmly, excited to reveal the carefully curated celebration. "This is lovely," Margaret commented, surveying the room with a critical eye. "Very similar to the shower I arranged for my niece last year, though we used peonies rather than these." "What are these again?" I asked. "Garden roses," I replied. Kimberly mentioned her favorite peonies have more presence, don't you think? Well, it's charming nonetheless. Throughout the event, I noticed Margaret subtly taking credit for elements I'd arranged, casually telling guests about helping select a menu or suggesting the signature cocktail, neither of which was true. More disturbing was Kimberly's willingness to reinforce these false claims, nodding along as her future mother-in-law essentially erased my contributions. During gift opening, I overheard Kimberly speaking to her college friends at the next table. "Margaret's been such a lifesaver with all this wedding stuff," she said. Thank God for her connections and taste level. My sister had all these budget ideas that would have made the whole thing look so DIY and cheap. The casual cruelty hit me like a physical blow. The budget ideas she mocked had cost me tens of thousands of dollars, money I'd diverted from business growth and personal savings to fulfill her dreams. The carefully curated vendor team I'd assembled represented the top professionals in Seattle's wedding industry, yet none of it was acknowledged. Industry, many of whom had adjusted their premium rates as a personal favor to me. When I attempted to discuss her comments later, Kimberly immediately became defensive. Were you spying on my private conversations? That's so weird, Megan. I was just talking to my friends. I wasn't spying, I explained quietly. I was sitting at the next table and couldn't help overhearing. It hurt to hear you dismissing all the work and money I've contributed as budget ideas. Oh, my God, you're so sensitive, she scoffed. It was just girl talk. Besides, Margaret's been incredibly helpful with her connections. Margaret hasn't paid for anything, I pointed out softly. I've covered almost every major expense for this wedding. There you go, again, making everything about money. Kimberly threw up her hands dramatically. It's my bridal shower, Megan. Can you just be happy for me for once, instead of keeping score? Before I could respond, our mother intervened, not to mediate, but to admonish me. Kimberly's right, Megan. This is her special time. Whatever issues you have can wait until after the wedding. I retreated, swallowing my hurt as I'd done countless times before. The pattern was so familiar it felt scripted. Kimberly behaves thoughtlessly. I express legitimate feelings. Family portrays me as the unreasonable one, disrupting Kimberly's happiness. 1 month before the wedding, the final blow to my illusions came when I discovered I'd been excluded from Kimberly's bachelorette weekend. I didn't learn about the 3-day trip to Napa Valley through an invitation, but via Instagram, where Julia posted photos of custom team bride jackets with everyone's names, embroidered everyone except mine. When I called Kimberly to ask about the oversight, her explanation left me speechless. It's not an oversight, Megan, she said. I decided it would be better to keep my friend group separate from the wedding planning stuff. You're handling so much already with coordination and everything. But I'm your sister, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. And technically one of your bridesmaids, even if not maid of honor anymore. Yeah, but you're also the wedding planner, she replied. It would be weird to have you at the bachelorette party. You'd probably be all stressed about wedding details instead of having fun. She paused before adding, plus, some of the girls find you a bit intense. No offense. Despite this devastating exclusion, I continued finalizing wedding details, confirming vendors, processing final payments from my credit card, completing the seating chart Kimberly had been avoiding, organizing transportation for the wedding party, and finalizing the Dalv timeline, all while nursing a growing sense of dread about my place in my sister's life. Then came the text message that shattered everything. I was at my desk reviewing the reception layout. One final time when my phone chimed with a group message. The participants included Kimberly, my parents, Brandon and his parents, everyone except me. Kimberly had apparently sent it without realizing I could see the previous messages in the thread. I scrolled up to find a conversation about final wedding arrangements, followed by Margaret questioning whether I would behave appropriately around their extended family and business associates. Then came the message that stopped my heart. You're not invited to the wedding. Kimberly doesn't want you there. Your presence would make things uncomfortable for Brandon's family. My father had added, Megan, we hope you'll be mature about this and understand. This is Kimberly's special day. My mother followed with, it's really for the best. Dear, you can still finish the planning work, of course. And finally, from Kimberly, we still expect everything to be handled professionally. All vendors are paid for, so there shouldn't be any issues. With you not attending, I stared at my phone, unable to process what I was reading. After $35,000 of my money, hundreds of hours of professional work, and emotional investment beyond measure, I was being uninvited from my own sister's wedding, the wedding I had largely funded and entirely planned. The casual cruelty stunned me. Not just the uninviting, but the expectation that I would continue working on an event I was no longer welcome to attend. The assumption that I would accept this humiliation without protest. The complete disregard for my feelings, contributions, and place in the family. In that moment, staring at those heartless words on my screen, something fundamental broke inside me, and something else, something stronger, began to form in its place. The physical symptoms hit me first. My hands trembled so violently I dropped my phone. My chest constricted as though caught in a vice, each breath becoming a conscious struggle. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead as nausea rose in my throat. I read the messages again, then a third time, hoping I'd misunderstood, looking for any interpretation besides the obvious one. My family had decided I was an embarrassment, unworthy of attending the wedding I'd poured my heart, soul, and savings into creating. When the reality finally penetrated, I broke alone in my home office, surrounded by wedding planning files and vendor contracts. I collapsed into heaving sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of me. Years of suppressed hurt, decades of feeling second best, a lifetime of giving without recognition. It all erupted in a tidal wave of raw emotion. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I managed to call my best friend, Rebecca. My voice so distorted by crying, she initially didn't recognize me. "I'm coming over," she said immediately. "Don't move, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Rebecca arrived to find me still in the same position, staring blankly at my phone. She read the messages, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to fury. "This is beyond unacceptable," she said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. "This is emotional abuse, Megan, from your entire family." With Rebecca's steady presence as an anchor, I poured out everything, not just the wedding disaster, but the lifetime of family dynamics that had led to this moment. I described the pattern of being expected to give endlessly while receiving nothing in return, the constant dismissal of my needs and feelings, the way my contributions were erased and my worth minimized. Celebration of Kimberly's every whim while my achievements went unacknowledged. "I've been so stupid," I concluded, fresh tears flowing. "I actually believed this wedding would change things, that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, they'd finally see me, finally value me." "You weren't stupid," Rebecca countered firmly. "You were hopeful. There's a difference. And they've exploited that hope your entire life." For the next 2 days, I couldn't function normally. Rebecca stayed with me, fielding calls from concerned clients and bringing me food I couldn't eat. I oscillated between numbness and crushing pain, between disbelief and rage, caught between lifelong conditioning to prioritize Kimberly's happiness and the dawning realization that I deserved better treatment. On the 3rd day, I began to think more clearly. With Rebecca's encouragement, I reviewed exactly what I'd contributed to the wedding. Venue deposits and payments, $20,000 photography and videography team, $8,000 catering and bar package, $7,000 floral arrangements and decor, $5,000 additional vendor deposits and fees, $3,000 bridal shower, $4,000 in total. I had invested over $47,000, far more than my initial estimate of $35,000, along with countless professional hours and emotional energy, and for this extraordinary generosity, I had been cast aside when I no longer served my family's purposes. "This isn't love," Rebecca said quietly as we reviewed the figures. "This is exploitation." I contacted an attorney friend who specialized in contract law, explaining the situation and asking about my legal obligations. His assessment was clear. While I had moral and professional responsibilities to the vendors I'd personally contracted, I had no legal obligation to continue providing unpaid services for an event I was now explicitly uninvited from attending. "Document everything," he advised. "Every text, every email, every payment. Create a comprehensive record of your contributions and communications, then decide what you want to do next from a position of knowledge, rather than emotion." For the next several hours, I methodically compiled evidence of my financial and professional investment in Kimberly's wedding. I created backups of all vendor communications and contracts. I documented every payment with date, amount, and purpose. I secured copies of text messages and emails showing the evolution of my involvement and the family's expectations. Throughout this process, something shifted within me. The shock and hurt began to transform into clarity and resolve. I recognized that this devastating text message was merely the culmination of a lifetime pattern, not an isolated incident. I saw, with painful clarity, how I had participated in my own mistreatment by continually accepting the unacceptable. With this new perspective came a decisive plan of action. I would not continue to enable my family's exploitation. I would not silently absorb this final humiliation. I would stand up for myself with the same ferocity I'd always directed toward protecting Kimberly's interests. I carefully composed my response, reviewing it with both Rebecca and my attorney to ensure it conveyed my position clearly without creating legal liability. Then, with a steadiness that surprised me, I sent a single message to the group thread: "Then pay for it yourselves, leeches." Before anyone could respond, I systematically executed the next phase of my plan. First, I created secure backups of all 55 wedding planning files for my own records and protection. Then, with Rebecca witnessing the process, I deleted each file from my active systems: the comprehensive timeline, vendor contact list, detailed seating chart, custom floor plans, specialized photography shot list, all of it. Next, I contacted each vendor I'd personally hired, explaining that circumstances had changed and providing new billing information for final payments. I canceled payment authorizations on my credit cards and notified my bank to block any pending charges related to the wedding. Finally, I blocked every member of my family and Brandon's family on my phone, email, and all social media platforms. The digital severance was swift and complete. A virtual door slammed on decades of toxic family dynamics. When it was done, I sat in unexpected silence, my breathing steady for the first time in days. The pain remained a raw wound that would take time to heal, but alongside it grew something new and unfamiliar, a sense of power, for the first time in my life. I had chosen myself over Kimberly's demands, my own well-being over my parents' expectations. "How do you feel?" Rebecca asked cautiously. I considered the question carefully. Before answering, like I'm finally standing up straight after a lifetime of bending to fit into a space too small for me. The road ahead would be difficult. I knew there would be financial consequences, potential professional complications, and the emotional aftermath of family estrangement. But in that moment of newfound dignity, I felt something I'd rarely experienced in relation to my family: peace. The response to my actions was swift and predictable. Within minutes of sending my message and implementing my plan, my phone exploded with notifications before the blocks took effect. Voicemails ranged from Kimberly's hysterical accusations to my father's cold fury to Brandon's parents' threats of legal action. I listened to each message once, documented it, then deleted it. Each voice carried less power than it would have days earlier. My family's ability to manipulate my emotions through guilt, obligation, and fear had diminished dramatically once I recognized the pattern for what it was. My attorney confirmed what I already suspected. Despite the threats, my family had no viable legal claim against me. I had documentation proving my financial contributions were gifts, not loans or contractual obligations. I had fulfilled all professional commitments to vendors, ensuring they would be paid for services rendered. I had protected myself while acting ethically toward the innocent third parties involved in the wedding. The most difficult period was the first 2 weeks of separation. Decades of conditioning had trained me to prioritize family harmony above my own well-being. Each day required conscious effort to maintain my boundaries. To remind myself I deserved better treatment than I had received, I began working with a therapist Rebecca recommended, beginning the long process of untangling my self-worth from my family's approval. Through industry connections, I learned Kimberly's wedding proceeded as scheduled, though drastically downsized and relocated to Brandon's parents' country club. The elaborate details I had arranged were replaced with the club's standard offerings. The premium vendor team I'd assembled was substituted with the club's regular service providers. The dream wedding Kimberly had envisioned and I had largely funded became a modest celebration constrained by what her family was actually willing to pay for on what would have been the wedding day. I took Rebecca's advice and planned a self-care retreat. I booked a cabin on the Olympic Peninsula, far from the cell service and wedding venues. I hiked through ancient forests, photographed landscapes rather than carefully posed couples, and allowed myself to fully experience the complex emotions of the day without judgment. Surprisingly, several extended family members reached out with supportive messages. My mother's sister, Aunt Catherine, called to say she had declined to attend the wedding after learning how I'd been treated. My cousin Michael sent a text expressing his disgust with Kimberly's behavior and asking if I needed anything. These unexpected allies helped me recognize that not everyone in my family shared my parents' and sisters' values, a realization that provided comfort during the lonely initial months. 6 months after the wedding incident, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The financial setback required strategic adjustments to my business, which ultimately strengthened my professional practices. I implemented clear contracts for all clients, including family, with detailed payment schedules and scope of limitations. I established healthy boundaries with clients who exhibited warning signs of Kimberly-like entitlement. Most importantly, I reclaimed time and creative energy previously consumed by family drama. I developed new photography techniques I'd been too busy to explore, launched a mentorship program for emerging photographers, and cultivated client relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. Therapy helped me process the grief of family estrangement because it was grief. Despite the toxicity of those relationships, I mourned the family I had wished for rather than the one I actually had. I acknowledged the pain of rejection while recognizing it reflected their limitations, not my worth. Through this healing process, I developed what my therapist called a chosen family: relationships built on genuine care and reciprocity rather than biological obligation. Rebecca remained my steadfast supporter. Industry colleagues became close friends. Former clients invited me into their lives as more than just their photographer. These connections, freely chosen and mutually nurturing, began filling the void left by family estrangement. 1 year after the wedding, unexpected news reached me through my aunt Kimberly and Brandon were having serious marital problems. According to family gossip, Brandon's parents had become increasingly controlling, criticizing Kimberly's background and career choices. The golden daughter was experiencing firsthand what it felt like to be found wanting by the Thompson, an ironic turn of events, which I observed with complicated emotions. 2 weeks later, my parents called. After a year of silence, their voicemail struck a tentative, conciliatory tone. "We've been thinking about things," my mother said. "Perhaps we could meet for coffee and talk?" My father added awkwardly. "Family should find a way to work things out." I considered their invitation carefully, consulting both my therapist and trusted friends before responding. The old Megan would have jumped at this opportunity, desperate for reconciliation at any cost. The new Megan approached it with careful boundaries and realistic expectations. I agreed to meet them not at their home or mine, but on neutral ground, with a defined time limit. I prepared myself for various scenarios from genuine apology to subtle manipulation. I clarified in advance what I needed from them to consider rebuilding our relationship, acknowledgement of their role in the wedding disaster, recognition of the long-standing family dynamic that enabled it, and commitment to healthier patterns moving forward. Whether this tentative reconnection will lead to meaningful change remains to be seen. What matters more is that I no longer depend on their validation for my sense of self-worth. I've discovered that family relationships, like all relationships, should be evaluated by how they impact our well-being, not by the accident of shared DNA. The most profound transformation has been internal. I've learned that love shouldn't require financial sacrifice or emotional martyrdom. I've recognized my worth exists independently of others' ability to acknowledge it. I've found peace with my decisions regardless of whether reconciliation with my family ultimately occurs. I've built confidence in setting and maintaining boundaries not as punishment or retaliation, but as necessary protection for my well-being. I've created a life based on mutual respect rather than obligation, surrounding myself with people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. Most importantly, I've discovered that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's essential. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no to mistreatment, even when, especially when, it comes from family. If you've ever struggled with family dynamics where you feel undervalued or taken for granted, I hope my story helps you recognize your worth. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to value themselves. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength through difficult situations. Remember, you deserve relationships that honor your worth, whether they're with family, friends, or partners. Thank you for listening to my journey. I wish you the courage to stand in your own power, whatever challenges you might be facing.